In a residence inside the countryside, geologist Abby is spending time with her older sister, Beth. They've currently lost their mother, so they are seeking to aid every different emotionally to paintings via their grief. Tragedy strikes once more when Beth is diagnosed with a sophisticated degree of leukemia. None of the doctors takes her case because there may be nothing they are able to do to assist. However, Abby refuses to give up and learns of an overseas health center that gives much less moral remedies. To pay for sending Beth there, Abby has to take a very risky task. Sometime later, Abby arrives on the Georgian Caucasus close to the border with Russia. She's been employed by way of a non-public metal mining company to look for uranium deposits. Her father disapproves of this given that he thinks Abby should have a miles better profession than being an agency's dog. However, she's too determined to save her sister. She even asks for an advance price, but her boss cannot pay her if she would not discover something. Abby and her coworker Sergei spend lengthy hours searching for uranium to no avail. They may be alleged to live inside the distinctive regions. However, Abby decides to retain her search inside the forest. Sergei disagrees and factors out that it is able to be dangerous, so Abby takes his gun and tells him to depart without her. There are numerous creepy noises in the woods that make Abby a little worried in the beginning. Sooner or later, she calms down when she unearths a totally odd piece of black rock. Back at headquarters, Abby runs a bunch of assessments and notices that the rock's temperature may be very excessive. However, she's nonetheless not able to pick out it. Her excitement over this discovery is interrupted by using a name from her dad, who informs her that he is pulling Beth out of the hospital and bringing her domestic to let her die in peace among loved ones. She's in opposition to the idea, so she tells him that she'll go home to attend to the whole thing. At that second, the constructing shakes and the lights flicker. As soon as it passes, Abby packs up and asks Sergei to force her to the airport. She gets on a helicopter to move home and chats with the pilots, who tell her they will fly close to the border just to remind the Russians who the valley belongs to. After a few hours of flying, Abby is greatly surprised to look birds at this altitude. However, while the helicopter adjusts its direction, she realizes the shape outside it is no longer birds. It is a mysterious black shadow that makes a crackling noise. The pilot says it's getting closer before the helicopter starts shaking and the black surrounds the home windows earlier than it flies away. Then the chopper systems go down, including the radio. They have to land right now, but the engine stops running as properly. Abby puts on her seat belt as the helicopter loses pace and altitude, making it difficult to respire. She concentrates on her respiratory and thinks approximately her sister, last her eyes to avoid seeing the helicopter crash right in the mountains. At the same time as subconscious, Abby desires of telling her father now not to do something drastic whilst she's gone and promising to be back quickly. Eventually, she wakes up bleeding inside the wreckage and notices that a part of the chopper is on fire. To make matters worse, one of the pilots is dead. Abby checks on the opposite guy and bandages his injury, telling him to apply pressure. Then she is going outdoor to yell for assist to no avail. While she returns to the helicopter, the pilot tells her the way to use the emergency radio. However, regardless of how regularly she attempts, no one picks up her call. Then Abby tests a map and calculates that the nearest street is 60,000 kilometers to the south. She comes to a decision to break a gaggle of containers and start a large fire, hoping a person will see it from a distance. The following morning, Abby discovers the second one pilot has additionally died. She has a panic assault and cries as she realizes she is trapped by myself within the desert. Later, while looking to sleep in the chopper, she desires about Beth and her vulnerable health, which wakes her returned up. She is going out of doors to get heat by using the flames. However, her fireplace has long gone out. Refusing to surrender, Abby gathers every beneficial item she can locate inside the helicopter, inclusive of a gun and a flare. As soon as she's covered her body in sufficient layers of clothes, she follows a compass to try and find the south road. As quickly as she walks far from the helicopter, she hears the sound of radio static. She right away runs lower back, but nothing on the chopper is running. When she hears the static once more, she realizes it comes from a radio at the pilot's belt. Sadly, it runs out of battery while she attempts to apply it, so she grabs the helicopter guide to examine wherein all the cables and chargers are. She leaves the radio charging, and at the same time as she waits, she continues staring at her mysterious rock. Sooner or later, the radio works again and Abby makes contact with an American pilot named John whose plane also crashed inside the location. His legs are trapped and he cannot circulate. Additionally, his antenna is damaged. Abby knows she will be able to repair the antenna to name for help and asks in which he's. So John explains that he can see a lake. After locating it on the map, Abby begins a brand new adventure to locate him. John continues asking her not to do it due to the fact this is risky occupied territory, but she ignores him that even as she walks, John chats with her and asks her about her task. She's within the middle of mountaineering a hill whilst she explains that the cache is for her sister, so she has to stop and rest to position her feelings together. After John mentions the rare 1 in 1 million danger, Abby receives sufficient wish to hold her going. As she maintains to climb, she thinks approximately the time Beth tried to tell her that there was not anything to fight for and the way she must move on. Abby tells John that no person is combating for Beth, and John thinks she's lucky to have this sort of supportive sister. Sooner or later, Abby reveals a gap so high that she can't climb anymore, which means she has to head all of the manor around. As she modifications route, she doesn't see the black rocks nearby. Inside the new area, Abby does control to climb over the hill and enters the forest where she'll be resting for the night time. John tells her he isn't an ache anymore because he can't experience his lower half. Abby starts off evolved a hearth and makes a safe haven with a few sticks to sleep. Unluckily, it starts raining, which places out her hearth. But Abby feels something warm moving in her bag and remembers the rock. She takes it out and touches it along with her bare hand, noticing the surface reacting in a curious way. John tells her she should not feel embarrassment about her work, and Abby realizes he's within the military, so he's talking from Revel Inn. Within the morning, Abby continues her journey and reaches a valley included in snow. The wind is making her even less warm and she keeps tripping. Whilst Abby unearths a river, she stops to relaxation and refill her water bottle. A few hours later, Abby discovers that she's surrounded by some other mountain variety. The map does not display any higher route, so she has to begin going up. She walks as lots as possible, and sooner or later she has to strive hiking most effective to fall right now. John tells her to move back because she cannot keep all and sundry, inflicting Abby to go on a rant. She's tired of anyone telling her to prevent trying. What she desires proper now is reassurance and phrases of encouragement. A reluctant John says it's her choice and desires her appropriate luck. Next, Abby takes off her gloves and starts mountain climbing again. Now she can maintain on higher and in reality make progress. She keeps going for some time until she reveals an area with nowhere for her foot to grip. When she informs John of this, he says it's a disgrace due to the fact she became one among his favorites and hangs up. A careworn Abby tries to touch him again to no avail. Later on, Abby takes out a tool and inserts it into the rock, however it falls when she steps on it. She takes a second to take deep breaths and assume, which enables her keep in mind the mysterious rock. Her mind additionally recalls the time the health practitioner told her there isn't this type of issue as miracles. However, one is going on proper now due to the fact shifting her hand is enough to make the rock alternate form. After tying a few thread to the rock, Abby sticks it within the mountain wall and uses it as leverage so she will be able to appropriately step on it and sooner or later climb the very last region to attain the pinnacle. The thread pulls at the rock as she stands up, bringing it returned. At that second, she sees the mysterious shadow fly through the sky while making a crackling sound. Abby takes out a pair of binoculars and notices some lighting inside the distance, which belonged to a Navy base. She gathers sticks and grass to start a large fire, hoping it can get a person's interest. She also makes an arrow out of rocks to suggest the course she's taking. As she leaves, a few hours later, John contacts her at the radio, saying she has to forestall drawing attention to herself. He reminds her that the Russians manipulate this place, so if they see her signal, they may go out to kill her, now not to help her. This makes her so nervous that she slips down a rock-included hill and hurts her leg. Tired of John scolding her, Abby turns off the radio and takes care of the wound. At that moment, she hears a few radio static and notices a soldier patrolling the place, so she right away runs away. Between her damage and the snow, it is very hard to stroll, and she has to apply a stick for assist. After crossing the wooded area, she unearths a few vintage abandoned homes and makes a decision to go internal to both relaxation and conceal. There are lots of destroyed gadgets and even snapshots left behind by families murdered all through the Russian invasion. After checking every room in each drawer, she unearths a few things to begin a fire or even some moldy bread that makes her gag. With the primary resource package from the aircraft, she bandages her fingers and injects expired medicinal drug into her stomach. Earlier than falling asleep, she appears at Beth's photo and thinks about how tons ache she should be in. That night, Abby dreams of her satisfied days with Beth, however additionally of her at the sanatorium. Beth became tired of the medical institution and wanted to head home to spend her ultimate days together with her own family. Yet Abby forced her to live. Before Abby left for her new task, Beth talked about that she wasn't doing this for her. Abby turned into doing it for herself. The subsequent morning, Abby wakes up whilst she hears a radio. She looks outdoor and notices the soldier coming nearer, inflicting her to panic. She rushes to block the door and hides underneath the window, even as masking her mouth. The soldier takes a quick peek, but fortunately doesn't see her and actions alongside. While the man is checking the opposite home windows, Abby cautiously reaches for her bag, the usage of the stick, and takes out the gun, best for the magazine to fall out. The noise gets the soldier's interest, and he attempts to open the door to no avail. Even as he looks for some other front, Abby gets the gun prepared. Soon, the soldier unearths her and points his weapon at her, announcing something in Russian. Abby panics again and opens fire. The bullet hits his gun and then his leg, bringing him down. Then Abby takes the guy's weapon and backpack whilst he keeps repeating the name Ivan. She puts the gun right down to show she approached no damage and opens the bag to find a flashlight, cigarettes, and a black rock much like hers. At that moment, John's voice comes out of the soldier's radio pronouncing, "You were considered one of my favorites," and the soldier confirms that's Ivan. Abby freaks out and she or he realizes they had been each tricked. And the voice asks, "Don't you need to look Beth once more?" Earlier than the communique ends. In a while, Abby apologizes to the soldier and bandages his leg earlier than setting him at the sofa. She tells him that she'll go searching out the voice on the radio and that she needs him to ask his superiors at the base no longer to shoot her in the event that they see her inside the place. However, she isn't positive how much the soldier is familiar with her. The duo leaves collectively and continues stumbling as they go the wooded area because of their leg injuries. After they prevent to rest, Abby takes out the rock and hears the crackling in the sky. It makes her realize that the rock attracted the shadow, which added down the chopper and has been messing with radio transmissions. That's why the one within the helicopter worked once more after she walked off. Furious, Abby throws the rock away and screams in frustration. Then the duo starts crossing a valley protected in snow. As their toes pass the snow away with every step, they recognize they're taking walks on ice, and that is the lake. Abby maintains an amazing distance from the soldier, no longer looking to place too much weight on the identical spot that would purpose the ice to crack. She hears the crackling noise, and whilst she turns around, she discovers that the fellow has disappeared. Abby appears round for him, simplest for the ice to break under her feet, and she or he falls into the hollow. Thankfully, she manages to hold directly to the floor, and after masses of warfare, she climbs out. The wind begins blowing more difficult, and shortly Abby loses visibility. She yells for assist, however by no means stops shifting. Subsequently, she unearths the threshold of the woodland and the cigarette that the soldier left at the back of. Too worn out to do more, Abby gets rid of the moist clothes and gets in her a sleeping bag, hoping to get her frame warm once more. At that second, John's voice reappears on the radio, announcing that the equal befell to him a while ago. An indignant Abby throws the radio away. However, she will nevertheless hear John's voice sharing a tale. After his plane crashed, John had to observe his group die one by one. His coronary heart slowed down, and he concept it changed into over for him, too. But on the closing second, he found deliverance. Abby falls asleep and goals of her glad days with Beth again. She wakes up whilst she hears a helicopter, so she runs through the woodland as she tries to get their interest. But they cannot see or hear her, and the chopper leaves. The cold is starting to affect Abby deeply, and she falls to her knees while listening to Beth telling her to go domestic. She passes out and falls through a hollow that seems to be a cave. Abby's frame rolls down on tough rock and lands in a small pool. Floating next to her, it's John's rotting body included with chunks of the mysterious black rock. The bottom of the pool also has this black substance which floats as much as try to enter Abby's body. It appears this rock is a few type of identity that has been the use of real humans' voices to entice Abby and the soldier the identical way it caught John 65 years in the past. While Abby wakes up, she's sitting on 8th floor. As rocks go with the flow around her, the entity makes use of Jay's voice to congratulate her for making it, saying it had been afraid she'd come to be like the others. Abby accuses it of causing the crashes on motive and wants to realize why it lured her here. However, the entity says all choices that brought her here were her very own. Because the floating rocks form one half a human frame, the voice explains that John agreed to turn out to be the entity's occupant to live to tell the tale, and Abby's being offered the same privilege. Abby attempts to stroll far from the floating rocks, turning down the offer and saying she simply wants to go home. The voice replies that she's already home as Beth's house appears behind her. An invisible force pushes her inner, and he or she discovers there are piles of black rocks everywhere. The entity tells her she's afraid of demise and determined to conquer it, which she will do if she surrenders to it. Abby goes from room to room trying to get away the voice and is greatly surprised to discover Beth outdoor. She right away is going out and Beth holds her hand. All at once, Abby wakes up in her sister's home and is taken aback to locate Beth perfectly healthful. Whilst the crackling is heard in the heritage, Abby hugs Beth and cries. However, she has an imaginative and prescient of the hospital and realizes this is all an illusion from the entity. She involves terms with the fact that she has to permit her sister move. So, Abby apologizes to Beth for pushing her beyond her limits and says her final goodbye. Whilst Abby is ready to depart the house, the radio with the entity's voice attempts to persuade her to stay when you consider that that is the whole thing she desires. Abby denies it, explaining she's found out her lesson. Without dying, there is no lifestyles. Beth also begs her not to leave. However, Abby opens the door and goes out to the blizzard, screaming for assist. At that second, Abby wakes up in the napping bag, and he or she recalls she has a flare. She quick lighting fixtures it up, and the helicopter comes lower back to rescue her. For the subsequent 2 days, Abby stays inside the medical institution getting better. When she ultimately wakes up, she's in an apartment with Sergey and his grandmother. He thinks she ought to relaxation, however she wants to cross domestic, so he drives her to the airport. Some day later, Abby and her father visit Beth at her domestic, in which she's sorted via a nurse. Beth doesn't have a great deal time left, so Abby and her father move outside to have a breakdown without Scary. Later, inside the nighttime, the nurse pronounces it's time. Abby and her dad sit down on the bed with Beth and luxury her while she dies. Make certain to subscribe and activate notifications so you can watch more films like this. Thank you for watching.